It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. Thank you so much for joining me a little later on for the Investing Skeptically segment. We're going to talk about the cushion and how it works, how the cushion works versus the non-cushion versus the stock investments. So I'll save details for that segment. Of course, I also have, right after that, a little quick update on car loans and how much money you can make on your investment versus borrowing money. The other thing I wanted to go over is I just took a little trip, and I'm going to talk about that here in a minute, but I'm only home for about a week, and during that time, of course, I'm making this show, and then I will be taking another trip to Austin, Texas. And of course, one of the reasons to go to Austin, Texas is to be on the Atheist Experience TV show. And since I'm going to be down in Austin for a little bit over a week, again, I will probably skip an episode or more of the show. So again, if you're contributing money via Patreon, if you're a patron, you won't be paying if there's not a show. That's one of the reasons I set up the contributions per show instead of monthly, because if I only put out one or two in a month, you might feel kind of upset, rightfully so, that you paid for a whole month and got one show. So we'll see how that goes and what I can get out next. And then I'll be back in the office for a few weeks, and then I will be going to Italy. So we will go to spend about 10 days in the region known as Puglia, and then 10 days in the region Emilia-Romagna. The Puglia region is the heel of the boot, and Emilia-Romagna is north-central around the Bologna area. So we're looking forward to that. So again, I may be skipping some shows, and I might make a best of episode or two. And again, patrons don't pay for those either. So we'll see what I can do, but I've got a lot of traveling coming up. So keep in mind that I may miss a few shows. Just be patient, hang in there. And of course, if you'd like me to discuss something specific, send me topic ideas. The Investing Skeptically segments today, both of them are from listener requests. So I do try to cover what it is you want me to discuss. All right. Now, about the trip that I just took, a couple of different thoughts. I'm going to try to separate some of my thoughts and concerns, pros and cons about it. I just went on what's called the Free Thought Cruise, put on by, I'm pretty sure it's the Central Florida Free Thought Group. And as a cruise, it's very nice, I think. I don't have much of a reference point. It was the first cruise I've ever gone on. My wife and I went on this cruise. So it was our first cruise ever. We were cruise virgins? Yeah, virgin cruisers, whatever. So it seemed like a very nice cruise. People would point out to me that we were on a very small ship as far as cruise ships tend to go. And part of that is because of where the wherever the cruise ship went. And one of the places we went to was Havana, Cuba. It's something that is a little more challenging to get to, Cuba, and it seemed like a nice place to go visit, or a nice thing to see, something that is really hard to do. A couple thoughts about Cuba. Obviously, they don't have money. They're famous for keeping old cars, American cars, particularly from the 50s, because at the end of the 50s, I think if I have the timing right, was the revolution, and the United States government decided to start banning the flow of goods, including cars, to Cuba. So they had to keep these cars and maintain these cars. While I'm on the topic of cars, particularly in the 70s and 80s, all the cars that they bought were Russian cars, which, from what I understand from global car things, Russian cars suck pretty bad. So people who have money or really make an effort to get these cars from the 50s. Another thing that I learned is you can't be a tourist in Cuba. Apparently, it is illegal. So if anyone asks me, I have to say that I was not a tourist. I was on a peer-to-peer cultural exchange. So I was not there as a tourist. I was there for a peer-to-peer cultural exchange. So there's the detail on that. Cuba itself, we've decided, talking to several other people on the cruise, that it looks tired, very tired. A lot of buildings function, and it seems like a lot of things only get repaired at the most minimal economic, cheap level. And that includes roads. Some of the roads are really rough, and you can see these weird combinations of pavement and stone and brick and dirt. And that is the street in front of the port where you come in as a person seeking a peer-to-peer cultural exchange. The port, where they have 3 piers that could accept cruise ships, 2 of them have collapsed in on themselves. The roofs have fallen in, the floors and the walls are falling apart. One has been maintained, or at least fixed up to the point where it is a viable building, where it keeps out the wind and the rain, but it's cinder blocks and steel sheet roofing. It's not anything to write home about, but it works. And that's a lot of the things around. Because it was my first cruise, I had some weird feelings. And my wife in general, I think what we've decided is that cruising is not high on our priority list. It didn't really do it for us as a mode of enjoying a vacation. I didn't get any seasickness or anything, but kind of felt a little trapped on the boat. And again, other people told me because it's a really small boat, and by really small, there were 2,500 guests and another 1,000 employees on there, so 3,500 people on this boat. I didn't think that was small, but people tell me there's boats that hold 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 people. So maybe at some point I'll try a even bigger boat. But for a day or more while you're cruising, you cannot leave the boat. You have no option of leaving the boat. They have a sit-down dinner every evening, and the food there was anywhere from pretty darn good to quite good. Very happy with the dinner meals, very good meals. The breakfast and lunch, meh at best. Not impressed. Just not impressed. I have been to many places, and just random street vendors or restaurants that you could stumble into along the street are generally better at serving food than the, what did they call it? I can't remember what they called it, but the general open food place was not inspiring. A few examples: they had barbecue pork ribs. No, just no. The sauce had no flavor. It was runny. The meat was cooked. You could tell they were ribs, but I took a couple bites of that and I said, no, I cannot do it. One meal I got sweet and sour pork, and it was neither sweet nor sour. It felt like overpressed chicken nuggets, like chicken McNuggets. So I don't know what they were going for there, if that was actually really chicken or particle chicken. The texture was wrong, the flavor was wrong, and the stir-fried rice that went with it was awful, absolutely awful. They also had biscuits and gravy for breakfast. The biscuit was one step removed from hardtack. Really hard, crunchy biscuits, which is not what I envision with biscuits and gravy. I want them light and fluffy, and then the gravy was. It almost had the texture and the taste of a Alfredo sauce. It was not hearty like I expect. A nice peppery, sausagey, gravy kind of savory thing. So quite a few meal options were just not that good. I really wasn't. They did have a pizza place that had a pretty reasonably good pizza, but you don't want to eat pizza for 5 days. So that's kind of a buzzkill. And of course, the price of the cruise itself was not that bad. But then they play all these freaking games. So if you want to drink a Pepsi or a Coke, I don't even know what if they had both brands, you have to pay this ridiculous exorbitant fee, or you can prepay for a drink package, which I think for us were like $36 a day. And I think if one person buys it, the other one gets it at half price. So 36 plus 18, what is that, $54? So we paid $54 a day for the privilege of being able to drink everything except alcohol. That's a more expensive package. So between the two of us, $54 a day to have orange juice, to have coffee, to have mocktails, which were very nice, but Coke, Pepsi, lemonade, a few other things that they had available for fresh squeezed juices. And I get that it's on a boat and they got to carry all this stuff and it's more expensive, but $54 a day, that was harsh. And that's one of the things you don't necessarily think about when you're booking the cruise. So you got to count that into the pricing. If you wanted alcohol, like for one event, we went to a show. They have some shows, and they have a show basically every 2 hours, which means the show is about an hour, and then they got to kick everybody out. They do a quick little cleanup best they can, and then they let the next batch in, and you have another show. So the shows were nice, but they were only an hour, and I don't really go on vacation to go see shows. And if I do, I want to see like a real show. I mean, I want to see like Cirque du Soleil and the things that I love to see in Vegas, as an example. These were cute, nice, very nice shows, but I didn't want to go on a vacation to see these moderately good shows. We ordered a drink during one of these shows, each of us, my wife and I, and our cost, because we did not have the liquor package, was an additional $30. The other thing is, of course, you are compelled to pay a tip fee. Tip fee? What is it? Yeah. When you're tipping, like a restaurant, 15%, 20%. And that goes on your bill, $14 per person per day. So another $30, $28 a day that you had to pay. And then when they give you the drink, there's a service fee and an opportunity for you to tip again some more. So those little things kind of annoy me because I can't pick and choose restaurants. I can't, like when I'm in vacation, whether it's Poland or the United States or Italy, I can choose to go to a cheap place this meal. I can afford to go to a more expensive place this meal. A lot of those choices are gone. So I didn't really like that. And it also was kind of weird in the two stops that we made. One was Havana, Cuba, and the other one was in the Bahamas in Nassau. I think it was Nassau. I kind of felt like almost a target when we got off, because those places have a lot of people with really, really low incomes. And everybody on the boat obviously is doing well, doing okay. You afforded a cruise and you could afford $30, $40 a day for drinks. And you get off this boat in a big group. And particularly in Havana, lots of people came up to the group and they wanted to just sell us random things. Sometimes I didn't even know what they were selling. And we chose the walk around Old Havana tour, which seemed like 3 hours of a sales pitch, because they took us to places where we could go buy rum. They took us to a place where we could go buy cigars. And it was just that kind of thing. It's like, wow, I didn't really get a whole lot of the culture or a whole lot of the history. It was just an opportunity for them to upsell us more things that, and unfortunately for me, things that I'm not interested in. We did buy one bottle of rum from one place because it was only $6.50. Another weird thing about Cuba is that you can't use dollars there. Although some people disagree and said we could, but you have to use what's called the Cook, C-U-C. I can't remember what it stands for, but so you have to exchange your money. So when you get off the boat and you go through security and they show your passport and you do all that regular stuff when you go to another country, you then take some money. We took euros to change into the CUCs because there's a much more favorable exchange rate than dollars to CUCs. And that's cool, but the exchange booth window closes at 6 p.m. So if you take your tour and you come back after 6 p.m., you can't change your money back. And apparently no U.S. bank, and there might be some exceptions to this, can change your CUCs back into euros or dollars. So now it's this guessing game of how much money do I want to get, because whatever I have left over becomes virtually worthless. Now it turns out we have some relatives that are going to Cuba in 6 months, so we're going to work out something with them where they get our CUCs so they have some seed money to go. So that's some thoughts. Oh, as far as the Free Thought Cruise, very delightful. Because it was the first one I ever did, I didn't realize there would be so limited of activities in reference to the conference free thought kind of thing. It was a Free Thought Cruise, and there was a couple hours of events, and that was about it. A lot of people there have been many, many times, and they love it. They absolutely love it, and I think they love it because it's a good excuse to go to a cruise, and then it's a really convenient way to have a few hours to hear some speakers in the atheist, secular, skeptic, free thought movement. For me, it was kind of a buzzkill because we didn't really enjoy the cruising as much as we thought we would, and there wasn't enough. I don't think there was enough for me time to interact with other people who came on the Free Thought Cruise. It's not a mark against the people organizing it because the other people loved it. So if you really like cruises and you just want an excuse to have another cruise, I would highly recommend it. If you're not really in the cruises, not a big deal. So all that being said, we might go next year. I'm conflicted because next year they're going to go on an Italian cruise line. Okay, so regular listeners know that is cool for Phil because some of the staff will be Italians and somebody will be able to speak Italian. But a lot of the people that are working on the cruise ship tend to be pretty darn busy. So I'm not sure how much time I would have. And the trip next year is approximately 8 days, where this one was 4 or 5, depending on how you count it. And since we weren't really in love with the idea of cruising, I don't know if I want to go on a longer cruise. So just some thoughts about that. Again, like I said, coming up, I have a trip to Austin to go on the Atheist Experience. I believe that is the Sunday is April 7th. And then, of course, I'll be back and hopefully can do a show before we leave for Italy shortly after that. Anyway, we'll take a quick break here and get into the cushion and how to use it. Today's Investing Skeptically segment is the cushion, and more specifically, how to use it. So when to take money out of the cushion, when to add money back to the cushion, and things like that. So we've got to get a few caveats, disclaimers, what ifs out here before we get going. I'm going to have a lot of numbers, a lot of math, percentages in this segment. So if that's not your thing, sorry. If these are the segments that you love the most, you're going to love this one more than even most others because we're going to do some math. Another thing, of course, is that none of this is specific investment advice for anybody. Another one is that this did not really happen. I'm going to go over data from 2000 to 2018. This is a spreadsheet that I have created over the last couple of days, week or so, and tried to make this so that it's something I can walk through and explain the thought process. So this is not the right way to do it for you specifically. It's just to kind of give you an idea of how the philosophy works. The other thing is to make it not insane for me, covering 18 years of data. I have wildly oversimplified this process. So I just want to get that out there. If I think of some other disclaimers as I go along, fine. Keep in mind that how well this works It may not actually work this well in the future. It may work better. I have a selection bias to pick and choose and alter the numbers to make myself look good, or my philosophy and strategy to look good. Keep that in mind. And everything else can go to shit and this won't work. So just kind of keep all that in mind before we get started. I'm going to start in the calendar year 2000. And the reason I picked this, because I often complain that annuities or investment companies often pick key dates to make themselves look as good as possible. I am intentionally starting with January 1st of 2000 to make this look as bad as possible. So I am doing the exact opposite because I want to stress test the philosophy. So we're going to have the entire dot-com market collapse in 2000, 2001. And then we're also going to have the great big market crash with the capital crisis and homeownership problems and all that shit from 2008. This is a really bad period of time for the stock market. And it also, a good part of it, at least the last 4 or 5 years, has been a really bad time for bonds, especially long-term bonds. So I intentionally picked a time frame that is really quite shitty, because if I had started just 1 year later, or if I had started at 2009 and just done the last 9 years, this will look wildly better. So I tried to pick something that is kind of a worst case scenario. What I'm going to do here is we have a theoretical portfolio on January 1st of 2000 of $1 million. If you only have $200,000, or if you have $4 million, you can adjust this to fit your own situation. Again, this is just a theoretical example of what if. In this portfolio, the person has $400,000 in bonds and $600,000 in stocks. So 40%, 60%. Depending on your situation and your needs, that may be way too big of a cushion. It may be too small of a cushion. Again, we're just going through this to kind of work through the thought process of how pulling money and when to pull money from the cushion would kind of work. In the calendar year 2000, and by the way, again, I wrapped this all down to just 2 funds. Again, grotesquely oversimplified. The 2 funds, one fund is the Vanguard Total Bond Market Index, and all of the data is from the fund VBMFX, and the stocks are the S&P 500 numbers from the Wikipedia page for the S&P 500. So it does not include small caps. In the long run, small caps and long caps generally make about the same, but small caps do tend to make a little bit more. They're not included in this. Like I said, this is overly simplified because I could easily get the data. So I went with what I could easily get, what you can easily check. I don't have any REITs, real estate in here. I don't have any international in here. So again, wildly oversimplified. Regular listeners to the show know that I have given a laundry list of a half a dozen bond funds that I might use today. And for the United States stock market, I generally break it up into 6 positions. You don't get to take any advantage of the precision picking and choosing of selling like I normally talk about in this scenario, because I didn't want to take the time and effort, quite frankly, to go pull the data for 18 years for a dozen or 20 or 22 different funds. That sounded like a whole lot of work, and it would be so much detail, it would bury the general concept, which is the point of this Investing Skeptically segment. Calendar year 2000. The total return for the Vanguard Total Bond Index was 11.39%. That's right. Bonds made 11.39%. This goes to one of the long-term philosophies in bonds, is that often, not always, but often when the stock market goes down considerably, bonds do very well. This is also a time frame where bonds, some of the long-term bonds, are paying 7 and 8%. They're only a portion of this portfolio because it's the total bond market index. But again, it made 11.39%. Absolutely wonderful performance. The stock market in calendar year 2000 went down 9.1%. So, again, if you're looking at this at only annual time periods, another exception that comes into my head, I don't do this for clients once a year. I do this for clients as needed. So there's a little more granularity. What I might do is if someone needs $50,000 out a year, I might set their minimum cash on hand to be $30,000. And again, I don't even have the cash position in this. It's just bonds versus the S&P 500. And one of the triggers for me is when they fall below a certain minimum, say $30,000 in cash. If they need $4,000 a month, $48,000 a year, I might set the minimum as $30,000, the maximum, say maybe $80,000. Just picking numbers out of the air. So if they're taking out $4,000 a month for 2 or 3 or 4 months, and when I pull up my monthly cash flow and I see that they have $28,000 in cash, I will want to make an adjustment then. So probably the most granular would be monthly, but quarterly, but nowhere near as big as a year. But again, I can't do all this data for all the funds, for every month, for every year. So we're doing this just annually for the purposes of this discussion. So in the calendar year 2000, when stocks, as measured by the S&P 500, lose 9.1% and bonds make 11.39%, what happens after the end of the first year is bonds grow from 400,000 to 445,000, and stocks fall from 600,000 to 545,000. Again, I'm rounding. So that would be a situation where if you need $50,000 out, or $5,000 of your, or $50,000, 5% of your $1 million portfolio, you want to take the money from the bonds. Caution, here is another oversimplification. Bonds and stocks all pay dividends, and you get those as cash, so you don't actually need to sell as much bonds as I'm saying here, $50,000. But again, I'm trying to keep this simple and clean. So in this case, we took money out of the bonds. Great. We moved to next year, 2001. The total bond portfolio makes 8.4%, and stocks lose almost 12%. So if we need $50,000, again, we take it out of bonds, right? Straightforward. That's what the cushion is for, so that you don't have to feel the pain of the stock market being down. 2002, bonds make 8.26%, and stocks lose 22%. Again, the stock market went down. That part of your portfolio goes down. You don't want to sell stocks while they're down. The $50,000 comes out of bonds again. And for the next 4 or 5 years, bonds make 3, 4, 5%. No big deal. But stocks have a reversal of fortune. In 2003, they go up almost 29%. In 2004, they go up 11%, then 5%, and then 15%. And by 2006, what has happened is the stocks, which you left alone, have now grown to be worth $650,000. So more than what you started with the $600,000. But your bonds have fallen to around $250,000 from $400,000. Again, I don't think the result is going to be this bad in reality, because you can pick and choose on a much more granular level if you have 6 or 7 different bond funds and different stock funds and international and real estate. But again, to keep it simple, when we finally get to 2006, the stock portfolio is around $650,000. So what we do now is we say, well, we don't want to tap out the cushion anymore. And we've had 4 fantastic years with the stock market. We take our $50,000 out of stocks. In 2007, the stock market is up again, and bonds are up. Everything's up in 2007. So what I did for this scenario is I took $32,000 out of stocks and $18,000 out of bonds, just because that would keep the stocks no more than $600,000 and allow us to not drain the cushion too much. 2008 hits. The total bond portfolio makes 5%. The S&P 500 loses 37%. Again, the stocks fall. We don't want to sell there. But the bonds, the cushion hasn't fully recovered back to our $400,000. But that's where we're going to take the money from because we don't want to sell stocks when they're down 37%. In calendar year 2009, the stock market's up 26 and then 15. And again, in 2012, the stock portfolio goes to $650,000. So we took bonds out, money out of bonds for several years again. And now we are in a situation where the stock portfolio has fully recovered and we start taking money out of the stock portfolio. In 2013, the stock market goes up 32%. So now we are able to not only take $50,000 out of stocks, but we can sell $145,000 in stocks and put it back in the cushion. We're able to do that again in 2014 because the stock market has gone up so much. When we get to 2015, we just take money out of the stock market because it did a little bit better than bonds. And in 2016, again, the stock market was up 12%, and the stock portion would be $681,000. So we can take $50,000 out for our spending needs and $31,000 and put it in the cushion and rebuild the cushion. So for several years here, we're rebuilding the cushion until 2018 hits, and the total bond portfolio in 2018 is down minus 0.13, but the S&P 500 is down 4.43. So again, we're in a situation where we don't want to sell stocks that lost 4.4%. We want to sell bonds that lost 0.13%. Again, some parts of the U.S. market did far worse. Some did not do as badly. And some bonds actually made money in 2018, but I don't have that level of granularity because I'm just using the total bond market index, which does include intermediate and long-term bonds that I have been recommending against for several years now. So in this grotesquely oversimplified situation, after 18 years, we end up with a position where the bonds are $324,000 and the stock market part is $573,000. Now the cushion is smaller than we'd like it to be, and as a percentage of the portfolio, it's 36%, which is nice because when we started, we were at 40%. So we've been able to maintain this balance roughly while enduring the two big drops of 2000 and 2008. And again, with the ability to have more precision in picking and choosing, I don't think it would be as poor as this. The end result here is that you have about $900,000 instead of the $1 million you started with. But for 18 years, you were able to pull out $50,000 a year, experienced two of the biggest market corrections in our lifetimes, the dot-com crisis and the 2008 real estate bubble. Through both of those time periods, your portfolio would have gone from $1 million to $900,000, and you were able to take out $50,000 a year. So hopefully that helps you understand the general philosophy of when to take out of the cushion and when to put money from the stock market back into the cushion. So you want to create a systematic process where when the market falls, the stock market falls, you're not selling. When the stock market goes up, that's when you're selling and you're locking in those gains and refilling the safe stuff. When the stock market falls, you don't sell, you sell out of the bonds. And again, all the bonds and all the stocks will pay dividends. So it's not as dramatic as this is even in for the swings. But like I said, I had a limit to how much time and effort I wanted to put in, including dividends and everything. So this wildly oversimplified scenario, hopefully that helps. If you have questions, you can email me, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com. And maybe I can look at your portfolio if you wish, or give you some suggestions, or maybe explain something else about this process. So this is the end of the cushion and how to use it. I have a little bonus bit here, a little investing skeptically bonus thing, follow-up topic on buying a car and financing versus not financing, investing the money versus paying for the car in cash. It appears that I have very, very smart listeners that have questioned my mathematics, and there's some merit to their questions. During my segment, I had claimed that you could make $31,000 extra by borrowing the money for as long as humanly possible to pay for the car and investing the money yourself in the stock market, in this scenario, around $40,000. And my claim was that you would net $31,000 because you would make $40,000 in your investments and pay only $9,000 in interest. And so several people pointed out that if you were to take monthly money out of your $40,000 and use that to pay off the car loan, the difference would not be a profit of $31,000, but only about $9,000. And they are absolutely, totally right that that is how that would work. One of the parameters of my scenario, which I think I failed to make completely clear. So this is the part that I need to go over. The scenario was you had $40,000 in cash. So first of all, you have to have the money to flat out pay for the car in this scenario. So if you don't have that, it doesn't apply to you. The next thing is you borrow, you get a loan for the car as low as possible and as long as possible. You invest the $40,000, and then the additional criteria, which I was not particularly clear on, is that you are able to make all of the car payments out of your income, out of your cash flow, so that you do not have to touch the $40,000. So it gets to grow. Now, one could argue, and I think you have strong grounds to say that now I have created an unrealistic apples to oranges scenario, and there might be merit to your point. I'm not saying there's not. And so in that case, if you have to take the money out of the $40,000 to keep making the payments, you only clear $9,000. But if you do have the $40,000, and if you do have the income where that you can make the monthly payments out of your cash flow, and you let that $40,000 sit, you do clear 31 grand. You make 40 and you pay $9,000 in interest. So you do clear 31 grand, and you're kind of borrowing it or stealing it or taking it, whatever you want to say, from your cash flow to make that coverage. But the end result is that you have a considerably bigger portfolio. So I guess maybe there's a couple ways to look at it, but clearly making $31,000 is not an absolute fact. It is $9,000 because of the change, the difference in the interest rate from what you invest versus what you borrow money for, and also considering that you're making the payments from your current cash flow. So I wanted to make sure that that was clear, because apparently I failed to do that last time. So thank you, listeners, for keeping me on my toes and making sure I get all the math correct, or at least I'm able to fix it after I screw it up. The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Your investment should be based on your situation, and you should consult with your financial advisor before taking any action. The show may contain ads. These ads are placed into the show by the hosting company after I finish recording and editing. I have little control over the content of the ads, and you should not assume that I support their products or claims. If you choose to support the show via the new Patreon page, that support does not create an advisor-client relationship.
If you support the Catholic Church, isn't that like the same thing as being an R. Kelly fan?
Welcome back, everybody. This is Phil Ferguson, and you are still listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. With me today, I have Marie Delafont, and she is one of the co-hosts of the podcast called Everyone's Agnostic. Marie, how are you?
I am doing fantastic. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. And of course, the listeners don't know, so we're going to give them a little secret. Our pre-show, we were playing with your name a little bit, and I was doing the over-the-top French was, well, God, now I lost the voice. Hang on, I got to get into the Frenchy voice. It's like, oh, ma chérie, Marie Delefont. No, that's had too much rolling on it. That's the Italian. But
Yeah.
so you have this little podcast that you help with, you run. What's the situation between the two of you?
Yeah, I'm the manager of the podcast, and I'm also the co-host. So I'm pretty embedded into it, but it's only been pretty recent, like the end of October or beginning of November in 2018 is when I started getting involved with the show.
And you were involved in the movement secularism before that or not? Or this is a new thing for you?
I don't know about this whole idea of movement. Like, I don't know if I was involved in any official movement, but I've been moving in my own and working with my own, trauma from religion. And I've been, if showing up to therapy every week to talk about it is being part of the movement, then yes, I've been working on it for 15 years maybe.
I see. Let's go way back. I want to explore this a little bit. So growing up, I'm assuming then your family was religious?
Yeah, I grew up in Minnesota in the U.S., and my family was, when I was born, they were Lutheran, and then we kind of became General Baptist Conference, which isn't the Southern Baptist, but it's the lamer white version of Baptist that's kind of rampant in the Midwest, and so we were that up until I graduated high school. And then I got involved in some more extreme versions of Christianity through an organization called Youth with a Mission, and ended up doing missions work in Mexico for 2 years before I finally decided to leave missions. And then over a couple of years, I ended up deconverting piece by piece. Zooming out, that's the basic trajectory of my interaction with religion and my having left it.
Sure. Now, when you were a Lutheran, do you know what kind it was? Was it a Wisconsin Synod?
I don't think it was Wisconsin. It was the other one.
Well, there's Missouri Synod, there's Minnesota Synod, but that's really small, even though you're in Minnesota. And then there's ELCA, Evangelical Lutheran Church of America.
I'm pretty sure it was Missouri. That sounds right to me.
Yeah, that was one.
That was a funny thing. Like, I never got involved in too much of the specific dogma. Like, it was just taught to us, but it was never taught to us like this is what the Lutheran Missouri Synod people believe compared to. Oh yeah,
they would never do a compare and contrast because then you can choose a la carte.
No. Yeah. So the things that I look back on and reflect on in terms of the dogma that was given to me, I don't really have that knowledge to know this was the thing that the Lutherans believed versus this is the thing that YWAM believed. It all just kind of blended together as a continuous narrative, which didn't need to agree with itself because it was Christianity, and so therefore everything is true,
right?
Even if it contradicts itself.
Were they young earthers there?
Some were, yeah. I remember being taught that in some places of my religious engagement. But I don't remember being taught evolution as something very true. It was more we're supposed to tell you about this sort of thing, but wink, wink, nudge, nudge. It's a little silly.
We all know it's made up. Let's just move on.
Yeah.
So you did that, and then you got into, what was this more extreme culty-ish thing that you were talking about?
Yeah, it's called Youth with a Mission, and it's a religious organization that trains people on how to be missionaries, as well as actually has the missionaries that do the work. They also have music schools. If you want to be a musician in a praise and worship band, you can go to one of their music schools. I think they have one in New Zealand that my nephew is actually going to, which is fun for me to think about. But so Youth with a Mission was founded by Lauren Cunningham, who I had the great fortune of meeting, I guess, when I was in Mexico. And it's youth with a mission. The best way that I can think to put it is just they're on fire. These people are extremely galvanized and very, very serious about their faith and their relationship with their God. And their entire mission is to convert people and do a little bit of humanitarian work on the side, usually as a means of manipulation or leverage or some way. Like it's more like a side thing. Like it doesn't really matter if you're doing humanitarian work because the more important thing is their soul.
Yeah. It's funny. Whenever I hear someone say that they're on fire, I always think of like athlete's foot. Because you have that burning, itching.
As soon as I said it, I was like, I need to check my audience here because they're not going to know what I mean by on fire.
I think a good part of the people will, but there's always someone. And so what does it mean to be on fire?
So for what it meant to me when I was Christian is it meant that you were really aligned with the Word of God, or in your relationship with God, that you and Him were on the same page, that like you were doing all the right things and that you were doing the right acts, and that His Spirit was like in you, causing you to be a better, more holy person. So I guess that's what being on fire meant. I'm on fire for God.
Sure.
And
so I'm assuming
YWAM had that. Yeah.
Yeah. It provides you a whole framework for how to live your life. And you said you casually threw out their therapy. So I assume you were not totally joking that you've gone through therapy because of your deconversion. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. I started as soon as I left missions work. I got involved in therapy and have not stopped to this day. And I left missions when I was like maybe 20 or something, and I'm 36, almost 37 now.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've stopped. I've, gone through phases where it's more intense and I'm doing a lot more work because some shit's come up. And then there's other times where I'm able to take some time off, but it's a pretty stable, consistent part of my life to kind of need that. Sometimes it's for peripheral things that were, a result of being religious, or as a result of the messages that I got about not being enough, not, being sinful, being corrupt, that my body is inherently sinful, the things that it wants are sinful. So needing a lot of therapy to unwrap that worldview and reestablish myself as a sinless ape who's just in this world and just is trying to do what makes sense to me, what feels right to me, what doesn't hurt other people. Like that's the best that I can do. There's a lot of unwrapping of that dogma.
Absolutely. And it's one of the, I guess, dare I say, advantages I have, but a weak point that I have that sometimes I don't always connect with people that have had that experience, because I grew up Methodist and left at 13 and my parents said, oh, it's a phase. And the church we went to was kind of like, everybody gets to go to heaven. We just come to church. So it doesn't really matter. Yeah. I never really picked up or embraced the dogma. And of course, when I left at 13, I didn't have any adulthood years to look back on things that I did or thought that were a problem. I mean, I have my own issues like any human, but so I guess you would probably say for you, religion, at least the on fire part, was a net negative in your life?
Oh, yeah. Everything. I mean, on our show, we talk to people who have deconverted and left, behind extreme religion and settled into something a little bit more nuanced and gray. And a lot of those people talk about positives, that they enjoyed being in the church, that they enjoyed the community, or like being part of the church gave them a sense of stability and safety that they didn't feel at home. And so there's a lot of stories that involve people feeling positive about their experience, even if they've left it behind and think that all of that, the belief system is shit, at least for them. For me, I don't have the capacity to look on it fondly in any way. I think that if I was able to get to a more nuanced place, I might be able to see the value. So, like, I'm not sticking to it, being like, yeah, literally there was nothing good about it, but right now it's just very painful, and I have few resources, emotional resources, to have any kind of compassion on what I was taught, just because of how it affected me. So yeah, it was terrible.
Yeah. So
I didn't like any of it.
fair enough. So your experience, I mean, everyone's experience is different,
Right.
but was not a positive one. And you're out, yay you, and you're still working on getting rid of things. And some of the things you've talked about or I've heard on your show are things like how to interact with others. And I mean, on a regular human level, but also a sexual level, and exploring sexuality and what you're allowed to do and not do. Can you talk about that for a moment, at least at a level you're comfortable with?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm an open book about all this stuff, and I find it really exciting because, and I think what you're hinting at is that I'm polyamorous, which is something that came up as a result, I believe, as a direct result of being someone who had a worldview that informed her of her reality, and then having that destroyed, or not being able to hold on to it not holding any water, and having to release it as a young adult, which is very late to have to lose an entire worldview, and that how much work that involved, and how much emotional resiliency and integrity that involves to follow that rabbit trail or hole. What is it called? Rabbit hole. And that quality about me, or that characteristic about me, has moved me into exploring other questions, one of which was, what's the deal with monogamy? Like, why is that a thing? Especially if I've released religion, which is the driving force behind the message of being monogamous, which means having one partner at a time. And it's not like, even if it was the case, but it's not like I was like, oh, I need to go fuck everyone. It was really not that. It was just like, I honestly don't understand what the point is. Like, I could be learning so much more about myself and more about other people and having more fulfilling relationships in my life, and I'm not, because of why. So I found myself questioning that, and I am married, and we questioned it together and read books together, and it just kind of fell apart, just like religion did.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we were left with no reasons personally for why we felt that monogamy was essential for us, which of course non-monogamy is not for everyone. But I like a challenge. I like challenging societal norms, and so we started exploring that. And so we've been what we identify as polyamorous, and we've been so for almost 2.5 years, and like that has been amazing, like so good for me in so many ways, like dealing with self-esteem issues, self-worth issues. I mean, you really get to be challenged when all of a sudden, like, quote unquote, like, your husband could leave you for anyone. He could anytime he wanted to, but now poly is on the table, and now you have to ask yourself, do you feel worthy of this relationship? Like, or was monogamy this false comfort to you that told you that you were safe and fully loved and secure, and that he would never leave you? And I found that to be a false comfort. And now, having worked through those fears, like, one of the benefits is that I feel really secure in my marriage. Not that I think that we'll never divorce. I feel very open to divorce if that's what's appropriate to do. But in the meantime, I was able to see my value in our relationship, and to know that each day we choose each other because we want to, not because we're roped in by monogamy or any kinds of societal expectations. And there is something frightening about that, about losing that sense of security, even if it was false. But there's something that is entirely grounding about that, to know that your partner has the freedom at any time to leave or to do whatever, but they stay. They stay because they love you and because they choose to be with you. And so, and that's just kind of one of the big things that I've discovered while being poly, beyond just a whole lot of like sexually related healing that I've been able to finally explore, given that I was growing up in the 90s, which was in the Christian community, the time of like, what's his name? Joshua, the guy that wrote the book, I Kissed Dating Goodbye. I don't know if you ever heard about that one.
I don't know.
Oh, Jesus Christ, you missed something. Because he wrote this book, I Kissed Dating Goodbye, which is this book about how as a Christian, he's promoting the idea that you should stop dating people and that you should only be seriously courting people for marriage. And I can't remember if he did or did not promote not even kissing before marriage. I mean, obviously he definitely promoted not having sex before marriage. And
right.
Like the 90s again was like this big cultural, at least within the Christian community, this big cultural movement for purity.
Well, at least in the part that you were involved with. Correct.
Yeah.
Well,
so there was like a lot of like pushes to get kids to, like, I signed this form twice that said that I would keep my virginity for my future husband.
Oh.
And that was called, it was a movement called True Love Waits. And so they pushed that on all of us kids, and there was lots of instructions around, like, what sex is in terms of if you have sex with someone, then a bit of you, like, you lose a part of you, or you're dirtied, or the end of every sexual relationship leaves you harmed, like irreparably harmed, like there's a part of your soul that you give away, and that part and that soul is somehow finite, like it has finite pieces to it that you can run out of and then end up super fucked up or something. So there's a lot of really damaging messages about sexuality that we were given, on top of the messages about you're just sinful, that your body's sinful. I mean, fuck, if you masturbate, oh no.
Wow,
like, that's not okay.
I think that stuff not only could really fuck you up, but clearly the people promoting that have serious issues. Because they're making that shit up as they go. That's not even in the Bible. I mean, so that's weird.
No.
Another topic that you had brought up in the notes that we had email back and forth was about finances. And so, since it's the topic of the show, I may make sure I want to get to that a little bit. You mentioned about not saving for your future because there's not going to be one. Walk me through the thought process there.
Yeah, well, the type of Christianity that I was raised in was talking a lot about the end of days. Like at that time in the late 90s, the books were coming out for Left Behind, which is a series, a fictional series about the hypothetical events that could occur corresponding to the book of Revelation in the Bible, where it's like the end of the world and Jesus has come back to rapture his people, and then there's just a bunch of atheists left on the planet, and it's just a whole fucking mess, and everything's on fire, and everyone's dying, and it's a horrible thing. So there was a lot of that end of days talk, and I was led to believe that I would likely not see old age because Jesus would come back before then. So that informed a lot of my choices while I was still a believer, as well as believing that the most important thing in the world would be to get more souls into heaven, which, if that was true, I think that's pretty altruistic and awesome of me to make a priority, but it's not true. But all the same, since I felt that that was what was true, I didn't feel like it would be of worth to go to college. My cohorts who did go to college, I would judge them. I was like, because I'm the one that, leaving high school, I went straight into missions, and that I felt pretty damn good about myself, and I felt like they were wasting time and they should be going out saving souls, and I'm obviously the better Christian here. And so all of this also fed into this sense of financial irresponsibility. depending on the church a lot to fund my work, the work that I was doing. I never really saved anything. Not that I was making anything, but
Right.
I didn't really care about my future because I believed that if I was doing work on God's behalf, that he would have my back one way or the other and things would be taken care of. And even if they weren't, at least I still have God. So I was never really concerned about what that would look like, to not have the finances that I needed. And to be honest, I didn't really ever struggle because my parents would, throw money at me, or the church would throw money at me, or if you supplicate enough to people in your Christian community, you could manipulate them into them thinking that God is telling them to give you money. So there was a lot of that. And then as I deconverted and started having a career and realizing that the world isn't going to end, at least not according to the Bible, like that finances were important. And so I've gotten relatively good at that. I read Simple Dollar a lot, which is a really great blog with really solid financial advice. And I listen to you guys, and it's been really helpful. And I feel a lot better. And I have a nice house that I like now, and we've got some solid savings and a really good retirement plan now. And I feel much better about it. But I consider myself privileged to have that. My career ends up being something it pays okay and helps us to reach our financial goals. But for people like my co-host, Cass, who spent all of his life in being a pastor and all of his life, giving money away to other people who needed it or not worrying about his future for those same reasons that I outlined from how I made my choices in my early 20s and stuff. He did that all of his life because he didn't deconvert until he was mid-30s, maybe late 30s. And by then he was fucked. Because
you learned
the
skills.
thing on his resume is being a pastor,
So let's transition to that, because that's where I wanted to go next. So just like you're psychic reading my mind, you're working with Cass, and his last name is Midgley?
Yeah.
Good. I wanted to make sure I said that right. And he's obviously had this podcast for a while. How did you hear about that? How did you connect with him, and how did you end up being on the show?
Yeah, I found out about his podcast maybe 3 or 4 years ago when I really started trying to do some emotional work on my religious trauma. So I was looking for a lot of resources and came across Ryan Bell's podcast called Life After God. And right. I really enjoyed his show because he just strikes a more nuanced tone. There's plenty of angry atheist podcasts out there to pick from, and they exhaust me, and it's not where I want to go with my energy and with my healing, or how I want to process things. I want to be intellectually honest about stuff and not inject more anger into it than is necessary so that I can process it effectively. But anyway, so Ryan Bell really struck that tone for me, and he interviewed Cass Midgley. And so then I guess I just went and checked out Cass's show, and I really liked his because he's just more folksy, down to earth, and has a really great skill for pulling together long, complicated stories from people's lives into finding common threads that you can really just consume really easily and that are very satisfying. And so I've listened to his show. I've listened to his show for years, and he interviews people that you don't know about their stories of deconversion, and everyone has a story, and they're all moving in a way and can edify or strengthen or help you move forward on your own path of healing. And so I've always really enjoyed listening to those stories, and it came around last October that his old co-host was leaving, and Cass was dropping a lot of hints on the show about being really stressed out. And there was going to be a retreat in October where I would get a chance to meet Cass, and it just kind of seemed to me like a really good moment to step forward and be, did you know I get paid this much per year to do organizational work, and I will do that for you for free? Like, so
Yeah.
I offered that to Cass, that I would help him manage his show, and he took me up on it. And then pretty soon I was drooling at the mouth and was like, I want to be your co-host. And so he's like, sure, let's try it out. And so I got onto the show, and I was very, very nervous at first, fighting a lot of self-esteem things, thinking that I don't have anything to say, thinking that I'm boring, thinking that I'm inarticulate, that I'm a blowhard or whatever. Like, but I've really found my voice on the show, and I know that, I don't know, I love being on it. I love hearing people talk and share about their stories. I love the relationship I have with Cass and how we balance each other out. So I've been on, I don't know, like 8 shows now, and I don't expect to leave anytime soon. And I love being a part of it. And I love meeting listeners. I got to meet a couple listeners 2 weeks ago in Tennessee, and it fucking blew my mind. Like,
Well, you know what's funny? I wanted to go into that because I was just listening to the most recent episode. It's something that I actually experienced a couple years ago when you get a group of people and they, one after another, start telling you how awesome you are and how much you've changed their lives. That can be really cool and really fucks up your head. It's surprising. Because when it happened to me, and I don't know if you would call it the same thing, I've learned it to be the imposter syndrome. But when it happened to me, I really almost just walked out in the middle of a California speaking tour that I had.
Really?
Because it just, I don't know. And it was, what freaked me out the most was that I didn't even know why I was having a problem, because that's what I always wanted, right? Everyone to tell me how awesome I am and how much they love me. But you had this experience for people that were telling you your participation in the show was helping, and walk me through what happened and how you're dealing with it.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's overwhelming, and I continue to struggle to find English words that will describe it sufficiently. Because in Tennessee, that's where a lot of our listeners are, because that's where Cass is. And so he has a group of people that he meets together with every month, and they just eat food and talk. That was when I had an opportunity to meet some of the listeners, and I had fucking strangers coming up to me being like, hey, Marie. And I'm like, hey, I don't know who you are. And they're just like, I love that you're on the show. I love what you have to say. I don't even listen to the show anymore. I just forward to your monologue and listen to your monologue. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what to do with this. And I've been in enough therapy where I don't fight people. If they say stuff like that to me, I say thank you. Like, and I just eat it up. And I'm like, I accept that. I accept that this has value to you, and I accept the praise that you're giving me, and I accept the worth or the value or whatever that you're ascribing to me. And boy, that is something to deal with. I don't know how to deal with it. Like, just how satisfying it is, because I think one of the things I most want to do with my life is to help other people recover from religion in whatever way that looks like for them. And so then to be reinforced and to hear that I'm making a difference, that my voice and my story is making a difference in helping people process their shit. I've got nothing left that I need to do on earth. Like that makes me so happy. And cause every weekend I go into my office and I record with Cass and have a really good conversation with a stranger, and then I go on with my day. But then you come across these listeners who are telling you like what a difference you make to their life. And my mind is just explodes, and I just feel such a sense of satisfaction. And I've never been one for like, I need to leave a legacy. Like I don't really fucking care. We're just a bunch of apes, and the planet's gonna be destroyed anyway. Like, and it's just, everything's pointless. Life is meaningless, and I love that, and I'm okay with that. And at the same time, and then knowing that my voice is now on I don't know how many episodes, and like on several other shows as a visitor, like there's something about that makes me feel grounded. Like I think it has to do with how many years I just let Christianity fuck with me, and how many years it stole from me as I was recovering from it, and how many times I chose to be quiet when I should have said something, when I should have fought, when I should have left, when I should have got up and walked away. And to be on shows like yours, to be a part of this quote-unquote movement, to help people recover from religion is me saying, fuck that. Like, I'm going to fucking talk about this, and you're going to have to see this pain, and I am going to help these other people, some who are closeted, some who aren't, to deal with, to cope with, to heal from religion, whatever that looks like for them.
Yeah, I'm with you, and it's one of the things when people ask me, why do you do? I mean, the finance stuff makes sense because I make money, but why bring in all those other things? And I think that for me, I see it as I have a moral obligation. It's not even really something I can choose against. I have an obligation to be a voice to speak out against the harms of religion because someone might hear it and be helped. And that's kind of the thought process. And it sounds like you're a lot on the same page with that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, personally, I'm like, if someone's still in the faith or they found some kind of other supernatural belief that works for them, like, I just want people to be at peace with their choices, to feel that they have autonomy, to feel that they're being honest with themselves. And if that leads them to Christianity, whatever form that is, I don't fucking care. Just don't legislate my choices. Like, that's obviously a big one. Like, I get to marry whoever I want to marry, etc. Like, your religion doesn't get to dictate my life. But honestly, I don't care what people choose to believe. Like, I just want people to feel autonomous and like that they're listening to themselves and being honest with themselves. And I just find that really difficult to believe is happening when people believe in Christianity, but I've been told that there's people who are like that, so I have to believe that. But I personally, I just can't do it.
Yeah, I think there are people like that, but they are the minority. And, once you get to the point where you can pick and choose anything and everything you want within Christianity and be a reasonable person, then I have to ask, why are you still a Christian at all? But I know we're getting a little long in our time we had allotted. Is there anything specific about you or the show that we haven't covered that you want to make sure we get in?
I mean, no, not really. I just generally want to plug it, and if anyone wants to know more about the challenges of recovering from religion, it's a great show to listen to, whether you've always been a non-believer or whether you are a former believer. I find it really fun to listen to. Even, how can I say that? I can't say that objectively, but I've heard people who have never believed who like to listen to the show because we do talk about the specifics of being an ex-Christian or whatever, but then we follow it up with zooming out. So now that you're leaving behind this worldview, what's left? Here we are in the Matrix, and we're all here together. What does the world look like now for all of us? Not just the former believers, but where do we all find ourselves? And now what do we do that we're now all aware that we're on this earth, that we're apes, that, so what's the new reality and how do we move forward from here? So that's kind of where all the discussions end up going eventually. And so I find that people really enjoy, at least at the very minimum, those kinds of conversations that we're having. So I would invite anyone to come and listen to it. And it might not be their tone, and that's totally cool. There are a lot of other shows like ours. There's your show. There's many, many shows. And it's just a matter of finding one that suits your style.
Absolutely. And I love that there are so many shows because I don't resonate with everybody and you won't resonate with everybody, but there's something for everyone. Go look. And once again, this is Marie Delafont I'm talking to, and the podcast is called Everyone's Agnostic. It should be found in any and all podcast players worth anything. Of course, you have a website, everyone'sagnostic.com. You're on Facebook with the same name, Everyone's Agnostic, all one word. Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Patreon. Listeners, especially if you're a listener who already donates to me, go check out their podcast. Throw them $1 or so. The one recommendation I'll give to you, Marie, not that you are asking me, is it looked like you only had one tier. It was just $1.
I know. I know.
Make a couple other tiers, because every once in a while there are people that have real, genuine money, and they can give you more because they got value from what you're doing. So increase the value of your self-worth. How's that sound for you?
Oh, yeah. No, I agree. I talked to Cass about that a couple of weeks ago. Like, you want to create some more tiers? And he's like, nah. I'm like, okay, you're in charge here.
Yeah, that's right. And fair enough. And I made tiers, and I figured no one would ever do them, and a lot of people do. And, it's their choice to give more, because if you have made a difference in people's lives, and like you said, you've got to take their word for it that they've told you that, they will give you more than $1. But I'll leave that for you guys to hash out.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that.
Marie, again, thank you so much for being on the Phil Ferguson Show. I appreciate your time very much.
I'm really glad to be here. Thank you so much, Phil.
Hey you, it's me, Sarah Silverman. You know, lately I've noticed a lot of really sad, really long commercials on TV with like grossly sick, emaciated people from all over the world. And it turns out they look that way because they don't have food. And I know what you're thinking. If you don't like it, Silverman, TiVo past it. I did. You still see them. Especially because, like, I have a 48-inch plasma high-def TV. So every devastating image is in, like, brilliant, crisp, vivid, like they're in my apartment, you know. So how do I get these people out of my apartment, basically? And I think I figured it out. Like, all I have to do is end world hunger. And then I'm like, okay, how are you going to end world hunger? And then it hit me. Sell the Vatican, feed the world. Think about it. We need a hero, and who is more primed to be our hero than the Pope? He's literally a caped crusader. What is the Vatican worth, like $500 billion? This is great. Sell the Vatican, take a big chunk of that money, build a gorgeous condominium for you and all of your friends to live in, all the amenities, swimming pool, tennis court, water slide. And with the money left over, feed the whole fucking world. You preach to live humbly, and I totally agree. So now maybe it's time for you to move out of your house that is a city. On an ego level alone, you will be the biggest hero in the history of ever. And by the way, any involvement in the Holocaust, bygones. I know some of you out there are like, well, why don't those bums get a job like the rest of us? Well, did you know that the average Arby's employee in Ethiopia only gets paid nothing an hour because they don't have one. They don't have one. The bottom line is this. If you sell the Vatican and you take that money and you use it to feed every single human being on the planet, you will get crazy pussy. All the pussy. And I don't mean literally. That might not be your cup of tea. I don't know what your version of all the pussy is. But you'll get all the pussy. Amen.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
Once again, it's that time of the show to wrap things up. Hopefully you've enjoyed. I appreciate you being here very much. A couple things coming up. The next show will also be more than a week away because in a few days I'm going to Austin, Texas, and I will be on the Atheist Experience TV show April 7th, doing my damnedest to not embarrass myself. That's not my natural format, being in front of a camera, but already done it twice in the past. This is my third year, so hopefully that goes delightfully well. But I do want to promote a couple of things that are coming up for the next show. and a couple of them I already have the interviews ready and the segment ready. So I hopefully when I get back from Austin in a few days, I can put it together. I have recently interviewed a gentleman named Don Wubbles. He is a friend of mine from Champaign and is one of the most well-known, highest regarded scientists in the area of atmospheric sciences, and is a world-recognized expert on climate change. So we're going to talk to him and find out if it's real. Also in the next episode, I already have a little segment. I've done one before, and I'll do more as I get them. It's called Church Money. Someone from Michigan sent me the comprehensive budget for a church that they happen to be in. So if you have to go into a church to vote, which is awful, if you happen to go into a church for a wedding or for some other event or community activity, and on the table there they've got handouts, and one of those handouts happens to be for the membership to see the budget of the church, grab one of them puppies, scan it in, send it to me. We'll talk about it. You're going to hear some amazing details about this church next episode, and you'll be surprised how much money they give to charity. I do have one review on iTunes. Let's see here. This is from Humanist666. Nice name. And it goes as follows, quote, Phil's show has become my favorite atheist podcast and currently the only one I listen to. He interviews guests from the atheist community, and I particularly enjoy the audio clips he plays between segments. He gives sound and free financial advice. I wish I had known about Phil before hiring a financial advisor. It would have saved me a considerable amount of money. End quote. Thank you very much for that 5-star review. If you like the show, things that you can do to help out, you can go to iTunes and leave a 5-star review. You can go to Stitcher and leave a 5-star review. I'd appreciate it there just as much. You can contribute and offset some of my costs and the time that I spend making the show at Patreon, patreon.com/Phil, P-H-I-L. Nice short name there for you, so you should be able to find it. And a lot of people do give a couple of bucks per show there, and I greatly appreciate it. Each show can take anywhere from 2 to 3 hours to 8 or 9 hours, including the segments, the interviewing, the editing, the putting it on the internets, and all these funny things. So it does take some work, and every once in a while I contemplate the idea of, is it really worth my time? I think so. I think a lot of people get help from it, but you know, that little bit of feedback, either from a review or a contribution, lets me know that there are plenty of people that still enjoy the show. The other thing, of course, you can do is share the show. Tell a friend about it. I really like that. A couple of reminders. After the Austin trip, I will be going to Cincinnati in late April, April 19th, 20th, I think it is, that weekend, Easter weekend, for the American Atheists Annual Conference. So I will be there for that in Cincinnati. Also, because of a generous anonymous donor, the show has raised a total of $7,500 to create a drive, a fund. I can't think of the right word right now, but for students to get money off or free rooms or compensation for driving to go to the American Atheist Conference. So if you are a student and you intend to go or had thought you couldn't go because you don't have enough money, or if you know a student or you just like to share this on your Facebook, please feel free to do so. You can contact American Atheists. Don't contact me. I've already given the money to American Atheists. Contact American Atheists and get your scholarship, grant, whatever they want to call it, to offset your costs as a student. And hopefully maybe 50 or 100 extra students get to go to this conference because of the generosity of the listeners to this show. So I greatly appreciate that. Of course, thank you for listening, and I hope to see you in person somewhere at a conference, who knows where, out on the road. Until then, ciao.